Today on Racing Legends podcast, I have Andrea Seefeldt, legendary Mid-Atlantic jockey, my pal. I've done a couple of great interviews with Andrea already. Very excited to have her on my podcast today. Andrea, thanks for doing this. Good to see you.
Thank you, Julian. I'm very flattered to be here. Thank you.
Oh, well, you tell great stories. Every time I interviewed you, it's amazing how it flies around the internet. Just to reintroduce you to people, little bio. Um, you started riding around, I think, 1979 at Penn National, right around there, right?
1981.
1981. And
Pimlico.
At Pimlico, that's right. Okay, and your brother Paul was a trainer, and your parents had been academics, and you guys found the racetrack. You end up going to Penn National to get some more business and some more experience. You had some injuries. Ended up coming back to Maryland. Every time you got hurt, unfortunately, your brother was there, fortunately, to put you on horses, get you going again. And one day you went by Dick Small's barn, and he had seen you ride the day before, and put you on a horse. And I think your second mount, you won for him, and the rest is history. Together, you won with, I believe, Star Minister, Concern, Valley Crossing, Looming, some of the legendary horses of that day.
Mm-hmm.
And then you rode Diamond Donnie for Charlie Parker as well. But anyway, one of the most successful female jockeys in history. But more than that, very, very successful local rider. Better used to love you. You were known from taking horses from last to first on the rails sometimes, but you made me realize, and you reminded me, you won a lot of races on the front end, including on a horse called Sticky, I believe his name was.
Sticky was after I retired. Star Minister was front end. Higher Strata was front end.
Higher Strata.
Higher Strata. He was a rocket. He was front end.
So anyway, did I get most of that right, Andrew?
Yes, you did.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I wanted to start off with. I recently read the book The Fast Ride about the Delps, Spectacular Bid, Ronnie Franklin, a guy you rode for a lot, Robert Meyerhoff. Just lots of Maryland history there. One thing about when you read the book, though, things seem a little bit crazy at the racetrack in the backstretch, which, as a fan of the game, I never saw that. But I'm not sure if you had a chance to read the book at all. But did you remember the 80s and those times being lots of drugs and lots of craziness at the racetrack?
Yes.
Oh, is that true?
I do have memory to remember those days. Yes. Yeah. And yes, it was very accurate. The whole book, everything I thought was very accurate. I mean, that's the jocks room. He described behavior in the jocks room very well. I mean, it was a good read, even though a lot of it was not good to read.
Yeah, it was painful. It was painful to read.
Yes.
Well, was it hard, like for a jockey like yourself or someone who didn't know any better? Was it hard to stay away from some of the temptations that come your way?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you did talk a little bit about jockeys the last time we talked, and one thing you mentioned was you were a trailblazer in that we always think of it as not many female riders came before you. I think only one had rode the Derby before you or so, but
there were two. I was third in the Derby and second in the Preakness.
Okay, second in the Preakness. But one thing you pointed out to me last time is the percentage of female riders today is not much greater than it was back then, which
until just recently, it seems like there's a plethora of lady jockeys now doing really well, female jockeys doing really well.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think, for example, it didn't like mushroom and many riders started, and why do you think it's basically stayed it plateaued until recently?
It's hard. It's really, really, really hard. I guess not that many women are exposed to the racing, or girls. They didn't have many idols. I mean, Julie Krone was certainly somebody to idolize, and she did get a lot of coverage. And I think there was probably a spell after she retired where more girls got into it, but it's really, really, really hard. I mean, it's I can't emphasize how hard it is. And then it's I don't know. And now there's a resurgence of girls they're doing really well, which is great.
Yeah.
I don't know. When I retired, I had thought that in 20 years, women would be dominating as jockeys. because I feel that a lot of the jockeys at that time became jockeys, the guys, because they were small. And most of them didn't really like horses. They didn't grow up loving horses. They came to jockeys because their dad was a jockey, or somebody said, "Oh, you're a little guy, you should be a jockey." Most of the girls that ride love horses, and I think we communicate better with horses. Like Krone, she's part horse. I mean, that's what made her above. She speaks horse. She can talk to them, and I think that's what made her a better rider than anybody in our generation. She was, and she had the strength and the fearlessness, and I don't know.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons why the number of women jockeys hasn't grown until very recently is because there's so many more Latino riders than when you rode. So
Yes.
nowadays, I think it's probably safe. And generally, like in soccer, Latino boys play soccer, but the girls are just getting into soccer. Now, there are some great Latino women riders like Carol Cedeno, and there's others. But I think because of the Latino population, and I think just I think culturally it's a little bit different in terms of girls and women in sports and Latino coaches. I think that could have something to do with it. Now you mentioned Julie Krone, and I know we also talked about Kit DeSormo being role models for you. But they came a little bit not relatively late in your career, but you'd already been riding for a while before they kind of got into the game. So when you
No,
first,
Krone was already riding when I rode my first race.
oh, is
She
that
had
right?
already won some races, and she was just starting. She was riding for Buddy Delp then. She was just starting to ride for him when I started.
Right. What
And
about some?
then
Go ahead.
Desarmo was much later in my career.
Right. Well, then, but who are some of the other riders you must have learned from when you first, like, I guess Chris McCarron and Greg McCarron must have been there. And Bracciale, were some of those guys there in Maryland when you
Chris
started?
was long gone. Greg was still there. Actually, I think Greg was actually in New York when I first started. When I returned to Maryland, he was there a lot. Bracciale, I learned a lot from Bracciale.
Mhm.
Especially, I loved his. When I went to the Derby, I went to see him because he'd ridden the Derby. I said, "What do you think, Jimmy?" He says, "Man," he says, just get tied on because you're going to be sending for all your worth, and they're going to be passing you, taken back."
Wow.
Think about that. So like he was thinking that they're just gonna run by me like but which they did later in the race.
Right.
But yeah, that's yeah, Jimbo, Bill Passmore when I first started, he was very instrumental, very helpful. Danny Wright, he was always helpful and very supportive of me. It was incredible. Even when I started riding horses for JP Simpson, Danny's the one that he was still riding for Mr. Simpson then. But he was the one that got me kind of into Mr. Simpson's outfit,
Wow.
which
And can
is
you imagine this?
amazing.
Can you imagine those horses all of a sudden, Danny Wright's butt's not hitting the back of the Sorry about that, Danny. If you're watching. So anyway, I think you seem to imply that you were treated relatively kindly in Maryland, and that
Yes.
folks accepted you. And I mean, obviously, I remember when we talked, there was some like with Ronnie Franklin, or sometimes you felt blamed. Any aggressiveness, you feel like you get blamed. So you weren't really an aggressive rider until later on in your
Correct.
career when you got a little more confidence.
Correct. I was very careful in the very beginning because if anything happened in the race, the jockeys blamed the girl. And even there was one day Franklin was screaming and yelling after the race pulling up, and he called me, "Hey, word you don't call women. It starts with a C, and I don't know where this came from." I was very naive, but I just reamed him out, and he said, "Will you shut me off?" I'm like, "Well, then call me dumb bitch. Don't ever call me that again." The pony people cheered. It was like, pulled up after the race. I was just don't ever call me that again. And
Yeah.
I watched the rerun and I was behind him the whole race. I'd never been in front of him. And then there was another Jimmy Mosley in a stake race. I was riding for Glenn Ballinger. I was still a 10-pound bug riding a stake race, which is, okay. But he told Charlie Hadry, same kind of thing. He said, "Oh, she shut me off going into the turn." And I saw Hadry the next day because I'd go around and see the big guys and ask if they had something I could do, ride a horse, have anything I can work. And Mr. Hadry said, "Well, I don't know if I can ride you because, you cost my horse the race yesterday." I'm like, "Oh, really?" And same thing. It said, "Well, let's look at the chart. I was never in front of your horse. How could I have shut him off?"
Yeah.
So yeah, the girls always got blamed.
Yeah. Did you ever, was there ever intimidation factor? Like, I mean, obviously the jockeys fight. As a female jockey, did people ever want to fight? Did it ever get physical?
Not in Maryland. At Penn there are a couple jockeys. Yeah, there was a Hispanic kid, and he was dangerous. I mean, he was just dangerous. And there was one day he came. running up inside of me where he did not belong, and he wanted me to let him out. And I'm like, no. And his reins were dangling. He's like, I can't hold him, but his reins were dangling. Like, well, pick up the lines. So he was very mad when we got back because he was on the best horse, but I didn't let him out. And I think I might have finished second or third. And he wanted to fight, and then the other guys pulled him off. So there were a couple. And he ended up actually sadly not killed himself, but in a race, went down in a race, and
Wow.
he was riding a bad race, and caused the spill, and
Yeah. Was that helpful in your career when you went to Penn National and you started riding more? I know
absolutely,
you,
absolutely. I'd ride in Maryland. I started in Pimlico, then went to Delaware for the summer when it was good. Rode for Glenn Ballinger, the whole barn for a while, which was amazing. And I didn't appreciate what I had then whatsoever. It's just, just didn't realize what that was, the opportunity. And then I forgot where I was going with that.
well, whether it changed your career, because in Maryland, I think you kind of you got kind of stale. You weren't advancing like
Oh, riding at Penn, yeah,
yeah, the
yeah.
Penn National. Right.
Maryland, I was riding 1 or 2 a day, maybe every other day or something. And I started my bug year. I shipped up to Penn and won 2 races, and there Mr. Hadry again, stopped to visit by his barn. He said, "Oh, I see you won 2 races last night at Penn National. Is that amazing? Like, how's this guy watching all that stuff?" He said, "You should go ride there." And I was like, "Man, I'll quit riding before I go there." And then, I went home and thought about it. It's like, well, it's probably a good idea. I can ride more. And I did. I rode 5, 6, 7, 8 a night up there. And I learned a lot. I rode a lot of really bad horses. But I learned a lot about riding, and I got fit. And that was the biggest problem for girls at my age, genre, is that we just didn't ride enough to get fit. We always looked like a girl. You couldn't ride enough to get strong enough and fit enough and we didn't have equicizers then to help us get fit. So Penn got me strong and got me fit, and I learned an awful lot. And they're much rougher riding races up there, and it was really good for my career.
And you met a good friend of yours named Dale Gress up there.
Yeah, he's the one that in the beginning when he was older at the time, and like I was next to him in a race. I remember it was a long race, and he started screaming, "Get away from me, girl!" And he started beating me across the back with his stick. Get away! And he was scared. He was legitimately scared of the girl jockeys. And we did end up becoming friends because he realized I was safe.
Yeah.
But he turned out to be a good guy, just kind of.
Well, you mentioned that you were tall, and I remember you as a tall rider. Force, Force is a very tall rider. The McCarthys, Trevor and his dad Michael are tall riders. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of being tall? I mean, obviously weight's going to be more of an issue with the tall rider, but it's got to be some advantages, some leverage advantages too, I would think.
I think it's the advantage. You can fold up easier on the bigger, but the smaller horses are a problem, like Concern. I was too tall for him. The saddle set up on his withers, and like he had really long withers, and Dickie said he couldn't set him any further back. So I was always just precariously balancing on his withers, it felt like. And if you look at pictures like Gomez on him when he won the Arkansas Derby, he looks awkward as well. So did Bailey, but just they're about a foot shorter than I am. So I'm about 6 inches. So, not quite as awkward as I was on him.
Yeah, but so you have some leverage, or you said pull up on them, and there's weight issues. What are some of the other things that tall riders may have to deal with? Because there's a lot of tall riders out there, and then they do quite well.
Just I don't think physically, other than the weight. I don't see any other disadvantage except for that the trainer's thinking, you're too tall to be a jockey.
Yeah. How about as a jockey? Did you ever date other jockeys? Was it like you're married to Larry Knight and you guys have won a lot of races together as owners? So he's definitely a horse guy. But as a female rider, would you have to date someone that was in the business to kind of understand you and the danger that you lived in?
Yeah, and it was the racetrack's 24/7, 7 days a week. You don't really have opportunities to meet other people, and I wouldn't date trainers because I didn't want to get the reputation of that because that was another problem being a girl in the 80s, that a lot of the biases and the harder people to ride for were the wives, the trainers' wives. The trainer would say, "Oh, I can't ride you, my wife will get upset." I'm like, what's that have to do with me riding a horse for you? And I just didn't understand that fortunately there were some female jockeys that would trade sexual favors to get mounts. And I saw there was one at Penn National, and she didn't get very good mounts. Like, yeah, like why would you do that and demean yourself and still not ride decent horses? So it's, just I wouldn't date trainers,
Yeah.
and I wasn't exposed to the owners. I might have dated owners, but I wasn't had no really exposure to them. So I did date some jockeys.
Yeah. Well, the woman in Pinasco, she might not have been very good in bed. So that's, that's why she wasn't good. But one thing I once saw a glamour picture of you that you did for some kind of promotional, but you didn't really play that side up because I went to the track all the time and I saw you play. That wasn't something that you did. Obviously, a very attractive woman, but
Well, thank you.
you didn't trade on that.
No,
Like
I wanted to be known as a jockey. I wanted.
right. Because
I didn't want.
some riders
Yeah.
do, like Chantel and
Yeah.
others,
Yep.
they really play
And
that
I
up.
think it's great that the business has changed so much that she can be female and can be a girly girl. We couldn't be that way. Because we weren't strong enough. I mean, deemed as being strong enough to be a jockey. And now I guess, with less whip involvement, and that might be another aspect of why girls are doing better as well. Because when I was riding, you had to be able to hit a horse hard. And you
Yeah.
had to look like you're hitting. And I figured out it really wasn't. I had a big stick and I could hit them hard, but I looked weak. When I got a really light stick, that I could fling around and flare around and looked like I was killing them, but it was just a teeny, really light stick that I could move fast and
Yeah.
looked good. But it really was. They wanted to see strength when I was riding and how hard you could hit the horse.
Yeah. Well, by the way, did you ever meet Mary Bacon? You know, the
I did
playwright?
not.
You
I
never
did
meet her?
not.
Yeah. That's a whole nother crazy story. So,
Yeah.
I talked to a trainer in France, Gina Rarick. She's awesome. She's got so many ideas. But one thing I didn't realize, and I'm not sure if you do either, but in certain races in France, female riders get a
Yeah.
weight allowance.
That
And
started after I retired, and I was like, oh, maybe I should
exactly.
go to France and ride.
Right. And so, I've talked to others like Zoe Cadman thought it was a bad idea. And I think, let's face it, there's not very many sports where females compete against males. And riding is much more than strength, but there is a strength aspect of riding. How would you feel if they had an allowance like for non-stake races that was similar to bugs, but like I think in France it's like 3 pounds instead of like 5 pounds. Would that be something you think we should entertain?
I don't think it would be fair.
Yeah.
Girls would be kicking ass.
You think so?
Oh yeah, girls are better riders. It's just, and they're proving it now. Girls get along with horses better. And Julie and Rosie have proven that they can be strong enough and compete on an equal level with men. It's just getting the opportunities to ride the good horses. It's harder to prove yourself, but I think that's coming. I think we've broken a lot of barriers. I think it's coming.
Yeah. What made Rosie?
And
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, you
I was gonna
finish.
say in the sport I'm in now, the clay shooting, it's the same thing. The women, it was 10, 15, same about percentage, 10, 15% females. Now, and the women weren't beating the men. They just weren't beating the men. But that, I think, and I asked my coach Anthony Matarese when I first started, it's like, I don't get it. Strength doesn't really matter in this game. Why aren't women, horse racing, women can be equal on with the men. We don't need a handicap. But in this game, so we're not doing it. Well, he says numbers. We just haven't had enough women yet doing it that start young enough. So now I've been doing it with 10, 12 years, and there are girls 20 that have been doing it 10 or 12 years. I can't beat them because
Wow.
they've got the youth and the hand eye, and they've been doing as long as I have, but they don't have the broken neck, back, collarbone, tailbone,
Yeah.
all that stuff. And their eyes are good. But so anyway, it's coming. I think it's coming.
Now, in the shooting, do the women and males compete, or they have different kind of classifications?
We compete together head and head, and they do have what they call concurrent divisions, where they do have the seniors and they have the juniors and they have the ladies that are, separate category, but we shoot the same targets and we shoot together. And actually, women have an advantage because we get to shoot in the open category, and the women are starting to beat the men at the top of the game at the big shoots. The 20-year-old women's that have been doing it for 10, 12 years. So,
Wow.
and that's happening more often now that they're starting to win the big shoots, which is really hard to do. It's very difficult.
Well, that's exciting. Well, we'll get back to your shooting. I wanted to ask about Anna. What made Anna Rosie Napravnik so special?
Because she's a kid that loved horses and she rode horses when she was a child. She rode them her whole life. She understood horses. She was determined. So she'd ridden her whole life, and she was determined. I mean, that's just, and she started out in the right place with Dickie, gave her a good chance, put her on a winner first time out, and she constantly improved herself. I mean, she was, I think determination is probably the best.
Yeah. How about Forrest, our mutual friend Forrest? Forrest has had a really solid career.
Yeah.
I mean, she's definitely one of the top female writers of all time in terms of she's done
Yep.
it quietly because she's kind of hung out
Yes.
in Mid Atlantic, but she's really proven herself. What do you think makes Forrest so special?
Same thing. She's been riding horses her whole life. She loves horses. She's, and I think, if she moved on somewhere else and rode more horses, she'd probably do great. I mean, but the game has changed so much. There's so many riders now. Not that she's done great here.
She
She's
has,
done great at, Colonial. She's proven she can do it. I mean, yeah. I mean,
well, one common thread to this, to you, Rosie, and Forrest, but also Geraldine. What was Geraldine's last name again? Andrea, the rider, the female rider that rode for Dickie, Geraldine
oh,
Barnes.
Geraldine Brown.
Brown, Geraldine. There's one more, but they all Dickie Small was instrumental
Oh,
in them getting their first starts on at least big horses. And you'd ridden a long time before you rode for Dickie, but Forrest and Anna rode for Dickie almost from the very first.
beginning. Yep.
Yeah. So let's talk about Dick Small. First thing I realized when I was preparing for this, he's not in the Hall of Fame. Does that surprise?
No,
That surprise
no,
you?
it's ah, it doesn't surprise me. It disappoints me.
Yeah.
Doesn't surprise me. Billy Turner's not in the Hall of Fame.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow. Those are two amazing trainers.
There's a lot of
Um,
amazing trainers out there. I mean, it's yeah.
yeah. So, how would you describe Dick Small's training style? And would he be just as successful in today's kind of? It's a different game of training horses today.
I guess not. I mean, because he, the last few years he trained. The last year when I'd drive him into Laurel at once a week because he couldn't drive anymore. He was fighting cancer.
Um,
And he told me that like when I rode for him, so I rode 120 winners. I rode for him for 4 or 5 years. So I don't know how many horses to it. It's like I think we had 20% winners, which I never had a horse break down with him.
mm,
The last few years he trained, he had horses breaking down in the morning, and he said they're just not as strong as they used to be. They're just not. He can't train him as hard. He couldn't train him as hard as he used to, and he did used to train him very hard.
mm,
And that yeah, he said it was like, you bend a straw. It's a fine line of you have to train them hard enough to get their bones and their wind and all that kind of stuff. You don't train them hard enough, you get in a big race, and they need a little more, they don't have it. And he
mm,
said it's kind of like when you bend the straw in half, try to get the middle, you'd press just one iota too far and it bends in half kind of thing.
mm.
So it's,
So you don't do you think you could have adjusted to today's horses or?
I don't hmm, I don't know that. Well, he probably would have. Yes, he was such a good horseman. He would have.
Yeah, yeah. Did you ever meet Robert Meyerhoff?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep,
And
and his wife. Yep,
yeah, and what were they like?
very quiet. Very God, I was gonna say debonair as the first word came to my mind for him. Very quiet, very gentle, very kind, very to meet them. And yes, they loved their horses.
Yeah. So for folks who are listening and don't remember, Meyerhoff was a prominent builder in Baltimore, and his brother was Harry Meyerhoff, also a great big time owner that had most of his horses with Delp. They built museums and lots of the infrastructure in Baltimore.
The symphony, Meyerhoff Symphony in Baltimore.
Yeah, so they had a huge impact, almost kind of like Baltimore or royalty. But there was one thing that was interesting that I
He was a
read.
philanthropist, and he also did scholarships for in Baltimore. And I forget exactly what it was for underprivileged. He did a lot of scholarships and a lot of good for the inner city people.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And when I read the book Fast Ride, Jack Gilden's great book, and it was interesting because Tom Meyerhoff got divorced, and then when he got divorced, he one thing he did is him and Robert had been partners in the horses in the early days, and then at that point they went off on their own. Harry went with Bud Delp,
Mhm.
and Robert Meyerhoff went with Dick Small. Dick Small was a Vietnam vet, and he fought incredibly dangerous missions in Vietnam, and he created Fitzhugh Stable. So they both had this incredible success. Would Meyerhoff get involved? Would he talk about the races and stuff, or is he just kind of the owner that would just show up?
He was involved with Dickie, but for the jockeys, we only saw him in the paddock. We only
Uh,
saw him in the paddock, and Dickie was kind of scared of him. Not scared of him, but very much respected him
mhm.
and wanted to please him. And I think Mr. Meyerhoff was very demanding, maybe, or not demanding,
High expectations.
perfectionist, high expectations,
Yeah,
perfectionist.
yeah.
I mean, and they got along great. I mean, that's, I know they went to the sales when Broad Brush retired, Mr. Meyerhoff he did the research on the bloodlines and that kind of stuff, and went and bought a bunch of brood mares at Keeneland. Dickie said they took Dr. Tom Bowman down, and they picked out some really good mares to match with Broad Brush, because first four, I got to ride the first four full crops of Broad Brush, and there was winner after winner after winner. That was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Do you think that Dick Small he had to sell Mr. Meyerhoff on using you as a rider, female rider?
Absolutely.
You weren't in the top 10
Absolutely.
sometimes. So you think that was a tough sales job?
Yes. Yep. And he did, and I think, can't thank him enough. And he would tell me, he says, well, I wanted to ride. There was some horse, Catfish Row. We were working him at Pimlico. You could ask Brian Walls. This thing was a rocket. And I wanted to ride him first time out. It's kind of when I first started out with Dickie. He's like, no, I don't want to. If he gets beat, then Mr. Meyerhoff will blame you. I'm like, oh, he can't get beat, Dickie. There's no way this horse is going to get beat, because he breaks good. And usually Dickie's horses, the first time out, didn't break all that good, because he didn't do a whole lot of gate training. And so I was like, oh, yeah. And I think Joe Rocca rode him,
Hmm.
and he got beat. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll never question again.
Wow. Well, that's great. Okay, so you're riding you're riding for Dick now, and you're beginning to get on big horses. Did it change the way you felt about racing? Like all of a sudden, you're quickly riding Valley Crossing, big horses. There's pressure on you. You're riding favorites. So here's your rider. You've been a journeyman, and you're eking out your career. You're doing good, but you're not getting to where you want to
Right.
go. All of a sudden, you get this big break. So did it add to the pressure of riding? Did you
I
take any of
didn't I didn't feel any pressure. I never felt pressure. I guess maybe because Glenn Ballinger put me on stakes races when I was a 10-pound bug. I guess I just got used to it when I first started riding. It was no big deal. And I liked riding with the better riders. It was a lot easier to predict what they were going to do in a race. Riding at Penn National, you didn't know where those guys were going. They didn't know where they're going. It was
Yeah,
really hard to ride a race with them unless you were in front or
yeah,
way back. And I guess that's where I kind of learned that. But being in the middle of the pack up there was frightening. But yeah, no, riding the big races were just so much easier. They were fun. I loved it. I loved it.
right.
What did change though was all of my career, I didn't like 2-year-olds, because I was only exposed to not well bred, not well broke 2-year-olds. And I got to ride, I rode a lot of really bad, ill, poor, broke horses, 2-year-olds and older. So that did change, because now I was looking forward to the crop of 2-year-olds. I'm like, oh, what do we have this year? What's this one going to be?
Yeah.
And that was like the crop with Concern looming, and there was one that was better than both of them. So there were three of them. I guess they were the foals in '92. They were running in '94 that were really good.
What was the one that
And
was better than Concern and
looming, the horse was Barge In. He only won a couple races. He got sick in Oaklawn and ruined his breathing. He couldn't breathe anymore.
oh wow.
I rode a race on him at Laurel, and he'd made the lead a little bit sooner than I kind of wanted to, and he hung. And about the 16th pole, Concern came flying with Stevie Hamilton and passed us. And this horse went from hanging to winning by a length, kind of like Broad Brush, reminiscent of,
Yeah.
he had no momentum. Usually, once somebody passes you with inside the 8th pole, it's hard to get back and win. And Concern did not hang. He was running. And
Yeah.
this horse and he was huge. He just accelerated, and we won. It was just like Dickie and I were just so amazed.
Yeah. You guys had, I don't think it was politics, but you guys had logistical issues, and that often you'd have stakes horses running in one place and you're another place. You know, if you're riding Valley Crossing, and then Concern would be in or Looming or whoever. Do you think those situations generally broke in your favor, or did you feel sometimes, you because of the way the timing was, you may have missed out on something really good?
Concern in the Arkansas Derby because of timing and logistics. Looming, I had won 6 races on Looming, and we Concern, Punchline, Valley Crossing, Trying to think who else. We were at Arkansas, at Oaklawn for the winter for the spring meet. And Concern was going to run in the Arkansas Derby the same day Looming had to run in the private terms. And since I'd won 6 races on Looming, Dickie said Mr. Meyerhoff won me on Looming. And that's the day we got bumped leading the gate. And his horse jumped all over Looming, and we were 30 out of it down the backside. And I was going to ease him because he was so far back. I'm like, oh gosh. And he was stone cold favorite. Like, what do I do? And I kind of looked up, and all of a sudden, the rest of the field was really close at the 3/8 point. I'm like, oh, I haven't shifted gears, and they're backing up. So I went to ride, and because I thought he could have been hurt, because the horse really did jump on him leaving the gate. I was like, is he hurt? I can't, a lot of times they get hurt and you don't know it because they're adrenaline. And so, when I noticed that he was just like still galloping and getting closer, so I thought, oh, well, okay, I'm not gonna pull him up. We're going. And he came from out of it at the 8th pole. We were still 12 lengths out of it. Mark Johnston saw it. We passed him at like the quarter pole. And I think it was Wood, nice horse that Donald Barr had. Pino was riding at Wood something. But we came in and won by like a length, 2 lengths, just on Looming. No, I'm sorry. That was the race before the private terms.
Mhm.
The Tessio, same thing happened. We got jumped on leaving there. And it was a kid that jumped on me, turning for home. This is one of the times that I rode aggressive, where the cameras change angle, and he was on a dying horse and I was flying, and I took his spot. I kind of shut him off, which had happened to me a million times, and I'd made objection when that happened to me, and they'd say, you weren't going to win anyway. So this kid made an objection, and we finished second, got beat a nose, and they took us down. And as I was watching, as soon as that race was over, the Arkansas Derby won, and I got to see Concern win. So that was like one of the not the best days of my life.
Yeah.
Racing career.
Yeah. Did you ever get any criticism in the press for the horses being too far back? Since, I mean, oftentimes you're riding them the way they trained and the way Dickie wanted you to ride. But did you ever get any criticism for his horses being too far back?
I don't remember that. I don't remember him. I'm sure I did. I'm sure I got a lot of fans criticism. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you went out of town, so here you are, girl rider, female rider, and you go up and all of a sudden you're in big races. So you're racing against Cordero. You're racing against some of the top riders in the country. What was that like? How did they treat you, the big guys?
They were great. They treated me with respect, and that was kind of, I wrote Diamond Donnie was my first foray into New York. I think I've told that story already. I don't know if
Oh,
so. Diamond Donnie he was really fast, and he had the Wood Memorial. He set the fractions. I think he went a mile, and Easy Goer won, and a whole new, I think 134, a mile and 134. But Diamond Donnie set the fractions with Jimbo on him, Bracciale. I forget how fast they went, but they went really fast. And he ended up, I think, like 4th. But then I think his next race is Hutton rode him at Laurel, and Laurel Futurity, I believe, going long, and he turned right at leaving the gate to try to go back, jump back into the paddock. And he didn't make it. So, and then he also had a really bad knee injury that he had to have like a year and a half off or something. And when he came back, Parker figured nobody else would want to ride him, except for the girl. So I happily rode him and won an allowance race on him at Laurel. And he did, when we went into the turn, he kind of started drifting out a little bit. And I had learned at Penn National, it's probably better off not to fight him. So I didn't do anything. I just left, didn't pick up the reins or anything. And he came back in and went and won the race real easy. So we go to New York to ride, and walking out to ride the race, Angel, he's on like Sunny Blossom and Mr. Nickerson and fastest horses in the country at the time. And I was a little scared, like what's going to happen when these horses break out of the gate in front of him? He's never had horses in front of him. What's he going to do? We're walking out, and Cordero's next to me, and he's, your horse is a little nervous, huh? I was like, no, he's crazy. And kept on walking. Angel stopped dead in his tracks. Like, no, he's crazy. And leaving the gate, I'm 2 in front. Oh, I'm sorry, I lied there. No, yeah, I was 2 in front. And we go to the turn, and Angel's on my outside. And Donnie started to drift out, and I didn't pick up the lines. And he was drifting pretty good now. So Angel ducked inside of us, and when he ducked inside, Donnie saw him. and came back down in and shut him off. So I looked like a hero shutting off Angel Cordero, but we ended up second. Sunny Blossom set a track that was in the toboggan grade. It was a grade 2 at the time.
What did Angel Cordero say to you after the race was over?
Nothing, but he was always really friendly to me after that. Like in the Derby, we're in the post grade, and I was smiling ear to ear. I was like, "Look at this shit! I'm in the Derby. Couldn't make it at 10 national. I'm in the Kentucky Derby." And it just driving the post, going through the post grade. He, comes by me and he sees me. He winked at me. He said, "This is it, baby. Like, this is it. This is the show." He was always good to me.
What was the horse's name that you rode in the Derby?
40 something, and that's about how far we got beat.
Yeah, yeah, but it's an experience unlike any other race you've ever ridden before.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was just the experience. You land at the airport, the whole place on Friday.
Yeah.
The places of everybody in Kentucky knows it's Derby Day. You can land at BWI and Preakness Day, and nobody knows that that's going on.
Yeah,
it's just there's electricity in the air.
Yeah.
It was cool.
How do you feel about when trainers like Dick Small stick by their local riders no matter where they go? I remember when Hank Allen rode Wayne Barnett in the Preakness.
Yeah.
Sparrowan? I forget his name. Was that
Sparrowan? Yeah.
Sparrowan. It may have been the name of the horse, but he rode him in the Preakness. And you see this from time to time, but generally what happens if the horse doesn't get bought by someone else nowadays, they don't stick with the rider anymore. It's almost accepted after you get a certain, I guess, yeah, no, after you get to a certain level, they're going to replace the rider.
That happened quite a few times.
How do you feel about that?
It hurts, but you've got to understand the owner side of you. It's you got to go with the hot jockey. It's kind of the better experience, the hot jockey. I mean, I think maybe Edgar got taken off of horses for big guys in town. I mean it. Yeah, and Jimbo did after he rode the Derby. He didn't get to ride Broad Brush anymore.
Yeah.
And then yeah.
Well, we did. I want to finish up with Cordero on one thing. When you read Fast Ride and you read about Cordero, how he tried to take Franklin to the hot dog stand, try to put him over the rail.
Yeah.
Any of that stuff, I've watched those races and I found most of the descriptions pretty accurate. Do you think that was about Ronnie Franklin being a young guy they didn't respect, or what do you think was going on with Franklin and Cordero?
And Cordero did that to everybody.
Yeah,
he did that to everybody. I don't think it was specifically Ronnie, but he probably didn't much like Ronnie because he wasn't very likable. He was a jerk.
Ronnie was a jerk.
He was a jerk. I mean, he had reading the book helped me understand him better. Just and feel a little unkind about some of the thoughts I had of him, but he was a jerk. I mean, he was obnoxious. So a lot of people didn't like him.
Well, that's very interesting. Just to kind of set that up a little bit. Ronnie Franklin was a guy from Dundalk, kind of from a very working class area of Baltimore. Great athlete, a natural lightweight. Bud Delp, very early in his career, gave him a shot, but kind of acted like he owned him a little bit. And in the book, it is alleged that it was implied that it was Grover that got Ronnie into drugs.
I didn't know any of that. I hadn't heard any of that at the time.
And then Gerald, Grover's son, who also became a trainer, was involved with the drugs, and they kind of covered all that craziness a little bit. But I thought Ronnie comes out in the book very much as the victim of everything.
He was young. He was young, and there's probably a lot of truth to that. I mean, that's.
But when you said he was a jerk, what do you mean by he was? Give me some of the examples.
He was just cocky, little, arrogant, cocky, Dundalk, tough. You had to be tough to grow up in Dundalk, I'm sure, and be a little, short. And so he was just, he was kind of, and he didn't really respect women much at all.
Okay. Did you respect him as a rider? Do you think he was talented?
Not really. He didn't like horses. No, I wasn't. No.
Yeah.
He was an average rider, I thought, in my opinion.
I mean, he was a hot bug, but he was riding for one of the leading trainers in the country.
Right.
And he never really did anything after those first couple of years. And obviously it could have been the drugs and stuff, but it's really hard to gauge his career. Was he? I know how you felt about him, but how did others feel about him in the jocks room?
I don't know. I was very, very secluded, segregated. Being the female jockey, had separate did spend some time upstairs, but yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah. So, one thing, just to finish off on the fast ride a little bit. They talked about the bullying between trainers a lot. When Bud Delp would threaten to claim all of one trainer's horses. It was very much a mind game between trainers and stuff. And I guess it was Leatherberry. It was Dutro, the older Dutro,
Now,
um,
Fano,
Alfano, and all that. Do you remember that?
Wolfendale was big, and they were claiming
Howard or
Scotty
William?
Regan,
Was it William or Howard?
Billy Wolfendale.
Billy Wilson.
Howard had a few horses. He and Tammy did all their
Yeah.
own work and did very well as well.
Great horse, great horseman. But do you remember those days of intimidation and the game was played kind of hardcore?
I was young then and naive. I was around for that, but I wasn't involved in much of that. And I left for Penn National. I'd gone up to Penn when they were really duking it out, kind of thing.
Yeah. When did you know, or when did you start thinking about retirement?
Mm, I guess after going to Arkansas,
Mhm.
it was really hard coming back to Maryland. Hot Springs, yeah, it's kind of like Keeneland. When the horses come back from the race, the people were cheering for them, win, lose, whatever. The people were there because they loved the horses and the horse racing. And then you came back to Maryland and you win a stake race or something, and people are still yelling and cussing, and you're too far out of, or the horse I didn't hit with the whip, or whatever. It just it took, and I was fighting the weight, which was really big, and I had a lot of injuries. Everything hurt, and I was getting mornings were difficult for me. The morning work, if I didn't have, because the I was losing my heart fighting the weight, the body hurt, all of that. And the mornings were hard because I still got on a lot. Like Dickie did protect me, and usually I got to ride the better horses, but I still, when we went there in the morning, his horses to ride in the morning were a challenge. I mean, it just, once you got galloping them, they were fine. It was getting them from the barn to the track and the track home. They were a challenge. In the races, they were great, and in working them, they were great. But so if I didn't have to do morning work, I could have ridden longer. But you have to do the morning work.
Yeah. Did you have a plan for what you wanted to do when you retired? Because like one thing about being a rider, I was a basketball player, and a lot of times your identity is all caught up in being a player. And then when you stop playing, I didn't play at your level, but
Yeah.
but still, when I stopped, it was weird because I didn't play basketball anymore. And my friends are basketball players. Everything was involved around basketball. Did you have a plan of what you wanted to do when you finished riding?
Yeah, I was gonna have a small farm and a couple horses and a couple kids, and I was gonna retrain thoroughbreds to be show horses.
Hmm.
And I was a little early on that. That's big time now, but it wasn't still very popular when I first started.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
I kind of just didn't. I did all right. We did all right, but then Larry didn't like me traveling so much, so I started fox hunting. And so I did that for quite a while and had a lot of fun.
Okay. And that's not a competitive thing. That's just like a hobby.
That's survival. It's kind of like racing. It's not win or lose. It's come back at the end of the day.
So you got the same rush as you got as a
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Wow. So as an owner now, you guys have had a lot of success. I think Zig is one of your horses, right? One of your horses that you
Ziggly.
Ziggler,
Ziggly was the
yeah.
good one. Yeah.
Yeah, you had a lot of good horses. I was going to write them all down and read some of them, but you've had some success. Did you learn about a lot about the game as an owner that you didn't know as a jockey?
No. No.
Is
Well,
that
because
right?
I wasn't just a jockey, I was an agent, and
Oh, okay. I
I
didn't know
did
that.
my own all that, and
Oh,
I
oh, agent
understood.
for yourself. Got it. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I was my own agent. I did, I read the racing form. I understood at the end of my career, I knew, the bloodlines. I knew the breeding. I knew the bloodlines. I knew Maryland anyway, horses and top. But yeah, and no.
Do you still enjoy going to the racetrack today?
If we have a horse in, if
Yeah,
we have a
but
horse in.
besides that, no.
Not really, no. Even after I retired, it was very awkward going back. Like the first we'd go to the races and I'd go hang out in the jocks room because I didn't know how to go to the races thing. I was
Yeah,
more comfortable in the jocks room.
yeah.
And now I don't know anybody anymore in the jocks room. I don't think there's anybody left now. Richie Rich is still there, I think.
Yes. So when you walk around the track, if it's a big day, do folks generally recognize who you are?
Some people still do, yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, but I haven't been to Maryland racing for a few probably since I rode the old ladies race, and that's already been 10 years.
No, we went to Maryland Million. I saw you at Maryland Million. Got a picture
Oh,
together.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but that was before pandemic. That was
Yeah.
probably 6 years ago, right?
Yeah, it's flying.
Yeah, yeah. Do you ever feel like do you ever wish you would have ridden in today's world? I mean, I know that life is great and all that stuff, but do you ever are curious as to what it'd be like to ride today instead of when you rode? Or when you look back on your
No,
career, you think you probably hit it just right?
I think I hit it just right. The last of the good racing, the last of the sport of kings. It's at the end of. I think it all goes back to the '80s when they legalized Keno and lottery and that kind of stuff. There used to be Delaware Park when I broke my maiden. The grandstand was full. There, I mean, it's standing room only. And the same way in Maryland on Saturdays, there are a ton of people. It was packed. But once they started lottery, that's people started leaving the racetrack. So then and also the generational thing of you had Mr. Meyerhoff, you had oh gosh, I can't the Peoples, you had all the older the families that had traditionally always had horses. They had 30 horses. The Phippses, they're still in it, which is good. And Mr. Janney, the Janneys are still in it, Braden. So there are still a few of them left, but I don't think any of their children are, it's like the children just didn't have that. The sport of kings is gone now. It's a sport of syndications. And
Yeah. That's right. Well, you mentioned when you left Oaklawn Park, you missed kind of like the positive environment, the kind of the sport of kings environment. Came
yeah,
back to Maryland, everyone's cussing at you and stuff. But now when you go to the track, there's nobody there.
it's
So
weird. It's so weird going like Penn National mostly is where we've been. And it'd be 10, 20 people there. They did have, the night they had the camels and the camel races and stuff, and they had a lot of people there then, but nothing. Yeah, the only people there are the people that have horses in.
would you prefer, like, even if people are grouchy and grumpy like Maryland,
Yeah, yes,
would you prefer people there than nobody there?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It changed. Yeah, it really, yeah, it was a thrill. It was an event. There were crowds there cheering or booing, but
Yeah.
there were people there enjoying the racing. It meant something more, I thought.
Yeah. What do you think about the people that you rode against that are still riding today? Like one of your biggest role models was Kent DeSormo. Kent did so well. When we interviewed before, you mentioned that you tried to do everything Kent did. You tried to be Kent DeSormo, and he's still. I mean, he's had obviously some issues, but he's still in there. So what do you think about those guys, those riders that are still riding today after 30 years?
Mike Smith, yeah, God bless him. Yeah, it's hard to do, really hard to do. It's their bodies. I know how much they hurt and losing weight, and then being fearless. You have to be fearless.
Right. Kent and Mike Smith have weight issues. They have to reduce.
I don't know, but you would think so. I mean,
Yeah, that's just
it
part of
doesn't
it.
seem like it. I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah, Kent looks like they're both little guys. I
Yeah,
interviewed a kid. I don't know if you heard it, but I interviewed a kid, Declan Carroll, that just retired last week. So I got him on. I wanted to talk to him because he had a successful career, 4 or 5 years, and he rode for some big stables. He had to lose 4 to 6 pounds a day. So every
that's
day when he would ride, and I was like, well, how could that be fun? He said, well, it's not bad when you're winning. It's just when you're losing,
yeah,
it
yeah,
sucks. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So was it that bad for you? Did you have to lose that much weight?
There wasn't a hot box for the girls. I didn't have that option. So when I had the apprenticeship, I started taking Lasix and then laxatives. I started out taking a half a Lasix to lose a pound, and a year later, I was taking 6 Lasix to lose that same pound.
Right. Well, you're still in fantastic shape. So when you quit riding, how come you didn't get like so Declan? I interviewed him 8 days after he retired. He'd already weighed 135 pounds in 8 days. And he looked like he looked great. I'm not criticizing the
Yeah,
kid, but
right.
you could
That's a
tell
lot
that.
of water. That's a lot of water weight. Like when I got off of Lasix, I just lost the bug. And I was just about to lose a bug. And I was like, I can't, I almost had, I was at Bowie one day in the girls' jocks room after the race, and I was having like heart palpitations. And I was in the girls' dungeon there, and I was like, I could die. Nobody's gonna know. Because the girls' rooms were pretty,
Oh,
secluded. And I was like, I have to get off this, Lasix. And I stopped taking it cold turkey, and I was 12 pounds heavier the next day, just from
12
water weight,
pounds.
12 pounds.
That's not
So,
good. Yeah.
but after I retired, I'm like 130 now, which is 20 pounds heavier than I was as a jockey. And
But
everybody says I look the same.
you do. You're 5'9", right? 5'9".
5'6". I started, yeah, 5'6" and or 5.5, kind of got a little bit shorter.
Yeah. I get
The
I get
broken back and pelvis got shortened me up a little bit.
Yeah, I get more bow-legged every day, so I feel like I'm
Yeah,
getting
there's
short.
that too.
Yeah. How do you feel these days? Do you feel pretty good?
I do feel pretty good right now. I eat very healthy, work out. Getting coming out of retirement for the jockey race was the best thing I did because I had to get fit. Hadn't ridden in 16 years, and you have to be pretty darn fit.
Mm.
So I started working out, and when I first started, I couldn't do a lot of the exercise because it hurt my back or it hurt my hips or it hurt my knees. And now I can do most everything, and my posture is much better. Everything still hurts, but not like it did.
Yeah. Um, well, let's talk a little bit about how you got into shooting. Now, I remember when I first, so when I first saw your name on Facebook, and you're someone I looked up to. You were great. We loved you back in
Thank
the
you.
day. You were a talented rider. You were very attractive. Everyone just liked you. You're one of the boys.
Thank you.
Um, but then I
That's
saw
a
you with
huge compliment.
oh,
That was a huge compliment. Thank you.
oh, sure, sure. Well, then I saw you on Facebook with these guns. I'm like, oh Lord. I said, and I was like, I think Andrea is what a she's gonna be tough. And then we started to communicate a little bit, and you're just as nice as you can be. So I realized pretty quickly the guns were you were competing. It wasn't like you weren't trying to make a political statement with the
Right. No, not at all.
yeah. So anyway, tell us a little bit how you got into shooting and kind of how that's going.
I started that because I was on the farm one day and there's a rabid raccoon. And we're living at Larry's dad's end, and there's shotguns and there were shells. And I didn't, there was a box that had a picture of a little bird on it for dove and quail. And I'm like, huh, this big raccoon, I don't know. I don't want to piss him off. I want to kill him. Because the kids were coming to nieces and nephews were coming home from school and the dogs were, it's like something has to be. I called every person I knew, every man I knew that had a gun. Nobody answered the phone. So I had to shoot him myself. I ended up getting Larry's pistol. It had a, I don't even know what the stuff's called. It was already loaded. You loaded it and point and shoot. And I did kill the raccoon. And I talked to my friend Sheila Fisher, and I was like, I have to learn how to shoot. And she's like, I do too, because she's on a farm by herself most of the time. And she had a friend that had a trap machine, and a bunch of us girls from the fox hunt had started like once a week. We'd go shoot, and we got a couple lessons, and we loved it. So we'd shoot once or twice a week, and did that for like a summer or two. And then Georgianne Hale talked me into riding the old ladies race, and that was 2010. And after I rode the race, I was fit, and I was used to going out to racetrack in the morning. And I was 15 pounds heavier. Well, it was fun. And I was like, after the race, the horse came running, finished second for Mike
Yep.
Trombetta.
Yeah, I
I was
remember
like,
that.
oh man, this is fun. I want to be a jockey again.
Oh God.
Yeah. And but I was addicted to it, the training and having something to train for, and I realized I needed competition. And I was like, well, if I go back to show horses, I don't really want. They only had show hunters. They've got a lot of show jumpers now. If that was around, I would have done that. I was like, well, what can I do? And fox hunting was over for the season. I need to train for something. I really feel much better with a goal. And I asked around. I was like, what? I want to learn how to shoot. Do they have sporting clays competition? And a friend said, yeah, fox hunter fence. So he sent me to Anthony Matarese, who's world champion shooter, and he's an even better coach than he is shooter. So I ended up there, and I learned a lot from him, and got full in. But it was because of Georgianne's fault that talked me into riding a race again that
Yeah.
I ended up addicted to. But it was great. It's really good. It's a good addiction. It's a good group of people. It's all about hitting the clay target. It's not about.
Yeah.
After COVID, I had a lot of people come to me that wanted to learn how to shoot. It was kind of eerie. Everyone wanted to learn how to shoot. I'm like, well, I don't do self defense. I don't know anything about self defense. I'm in trouble. So it's.
Do you remember that time you invited me out and I went out? I had never really heard gunshots before. So I was ROTC in the Army. So I shot a pistol a little
Oh
bit,
wow.
but just for a little bit, but I had never been around guns before. So I remember when
It's a
you
lot of
invite,
guns going at the
well,
same time.
they're just all going off. And if you're not used to that sound, it is a really scary sound. And I remember it took me, I had a great time and everyone was so friendly and so nice. It took me like a half hour, 40 minutes to kind of settle down and get used to all those guns going off. But yeah, it was a really nice environment. I really appreciate you doing that. Why don't you talk a little bit about the organization? I think you formed an organization called Grit, Girls.
I didn't form the organization.
Huh?
Another woman from Virginia, it's Girls Really Into Shooting, Elizabeth Lanier formed that.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
And I had a bunch of my friends, shooting friends, that I thought would be a good idea to do like a monthly shoot. And so I did the local chapter, the Delmarva Grits, and we would meet once a month and have a shoot for fun, and I'd give them lessons, help some of them out, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Now, I mentioned politics and guns. Do you ever, like when you're when you're in this organizations and you're in the shooting world, do politics come up? Because it's such a politically charged part of American life. But I mean, you're in it for the sport. But do the politics about about guns ever come up?
A little bit, but it's amazing. There's probably as many liberals out there shooting as there are conservatives doing it. We just talk about the clay shooting. This target, oh, that target. I missed this target on that station. What'd you do with that rabbit target? I mean, it's all about the game, and it's amazing though. The kids too that are in the game, the young kids, they look you in the eye. You can have a conversation with them. It's just it's like because you have something in common, and it's us against the targets or the target setter.
Yeah. Do you ever get any African Americans there who are not coming to watch their favorite rider? But do you ever you ever get any black folks interested in shooting, or is it more?
It's still quite a minority, but yes, there are. And
Yeah.
one of the best shooters in the country is Theo Ribbs. His dad, Willie T. Ribbs, he drove in the Indy 500 the year that
Yeah.
I rode in the Derby, 1991.
Yeah.
And Theo's an excellent shooter. I mean, he's at the top of the game. Yeah, there are, yeah, definitely a few. Not many, but there are a few.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, this is great. Now you've lived a life where you've done a lot of the things that you want to do in your life, and you've
Been blessed.
it's I really admire that. Are there any other challenges or any other hills? Like I know you would love to do another couple old timers races, but
No,
as long as you
no,
don't have
thank
to
you.
lose 15 pounds. But do you have any other goals or things you'd really like to do?
I don't. I think I've accomplished a lot in life, and I'm really blessed and love where I live and just enjoy every day now. Do
How
a lot of
important? I'm
I do a
sorry.
lot of gardening, and still spend a lot of time outside. I teach the clay shooting, so I spend time doing that. I still shoot. So I'm happy where I am.
You have a great eye for a photo because you take a lot of photos of your farm and you post those, and you got.
It's hard to take a bad picture out here.
I know it really. You make the rest of us. You get to wake up that every day. You make the rest of us mad. It's a long road from a long haul from Pimlico in the morning when you had
Yeah.
in the tough.
I never really appreciated the sunrises then. I was too busy just trying to live, stay alive
Yeah,
on the
probably.
horses.
Yeah, half the time you're probably running late. Now, I know horse racing is such a big part of your life. Do you worry about the health of racing, and how important is that to you
Yeah.
since you're involved in the history of the game?
It's just sad. There's nothing. It's sad. Like I said, it used to be the sport of kings, and I do believe it's lottery and Keno that killed horse racing.
Mhm.
'Cause when the '80s, before lottery and Keno, the only gambling was racing, Vegas, and Atlantic City. That was the only legal gambling. Now people just don't. It's not. It's dying, sadly.
Yeah. Do you still talk? How's Paul doing? Your brother? We didn't talk about Paul today. Is he doing good?
He's a pastor now in Blackstone, New Jersey, at First Presbyterian Church. His sermons are online, and it's pretty incredible. I haven't been religious or followed religion, but listening to his sermon, I'm like, oh wow, this is pretty amazing. And he did during COVID, he did a daily Paul's Pastor Paul's ponderings, which were pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So he's very happy in that life.
Yeah. Was Paul always religious?
No, no,
No. Yeah.
no.
So either you or Paul fell far from the tree, as they say. But well, good. Well, look, I forgot. I should have brought him up earlier. Paul was a force. He had some nice horses.
He really
He had,
did.
he did a really good job. He had the respect of other horsemen. There's so many names like Paul that are almost lost to history, like Tom Cavaness and
Yeah.
all these guys.
Kenny Samita.
Yeah, that's right. Scott Posey. He was a little after
Yeah.
you, but so
Yeah.
many
No,
really good.
I won a few races for Scott
He
Posey.
did. Okay. Yeah,
Yep.
he was a really crafty horseman.
Yeah.
But there's so many people that got out of the game, and basically it's the question is who's left.
Right.
There's
Right.
very few left.
I think it's gotten harder to make a living doing it. It's the old joke with the owners that he make a billionaire out of him. He was a millionaire. I got that backwards. Make a millionaire out of him. He was a billionaire.
Exactly. I tooled around the game for many years and at a small level, and I loved it. But it just, even with, you talked about Keno, but with the slot infused purses and stuff, it's still hard to make money. The horses weren't sound, you get the vet bills would be really high. It was just really hard to keep it going. I think, 30 years ago, horse would run 15 times a year, and that was not abnormal. But if you can get a horse to run that much now,
Wow.
it's just very tough. So
Wow. That's
yeah,
sad.
it is sad. So but anyway, look, Andrea, I appreciate you. It's always great talking to you.
You too.
I learned a whole lot more about you today. It's just great stuff. Thanks for doing it. Hopefully we can, as always, keep in touch online. And if you're ever shooting down in Virginia again, and maybe you can talk me into coming back out. It's such a good time.
Okay, we'll have to get you. We'll have to get you to try it.
Yeah, I haven't shot a gun since I was 18.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
yeah. So
Cool.
if anyone could talk me into it, you probably could, Andrea. So maybe
Oh,
we'll
thank
try
you.
that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Julian.
Okay, Andrea, this is great.
Right.
Nice talking to you.
Okay. Bye
Okay,
bye.
take care. Bye-bye.